औज़ु बिल्लाहि मिनश शैतानिर रजीम बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम। मौजूद नाज़रीन, उम्मीद है आप सब खैरियत से होंगे। ज़रा शशि थरूर और प्रवीण सानी का जो जवाब है शशि थरूर को, जो उन्होंने केरला के एक फेस्टिवल में उन्होंने एक स्पीच की है और उन्होंने अपने डिफेंस में कुछ अल्फाज कहे हैं और उन्होंने कहा कि मैं अपने स्टांस के ऊपर कायम हूँ, जो उन्होंने पाकिस्तान के अगेंस्ट लिया था। और एक आर्टिकल लिखा था उसी वक्त मई 2025 में, जब इंडिया ने पाकिस्तान के ऊपर अटैक करना चाहा और फिर अटैक किया भी, और किस तरह पाकिस्तान ने उसको रिस्पांस दिया और फिर पूरी दुनिया ने किस तरीके से पाकिस्तान की हिमायत की और पाकिस्तान ने जो जवाब दिया था इंडिया को, और जिस तरह इंडिया को मुँह की खानी पड़ी थी। तो उसी वक्त पूरी दुनिया में पाकिस्तान एक लाइमलाइट में आ गया था और पूरी दुनिया को पता चला, दुनिया में आर्टिकल्स लिखे गए, इंटरनेशनल मीडिया ने इस मसले को उठाया कि इंडिया के कितने जहाज़ गिरे, इंडिया किस तरह पसपा हुआ, इंडिया का गुरूर किस तरह खाक में मिला, और किस तरह ये जो इंडियन पॉलिटिशियंस है, खसूसी तौर पर बीजेपी के जो पॉलिटिशियंस है, वो किस तरीके से अपने नैरेटिव को पाकिस्तान के अगेंस्ट अपने पॉलिटिक्स को घुमाते फिराते हैं और अपने लोगों को किस तरह बेवकूफ़ बनाते हैं। इंडिया में अगर मैं किसी एक बंदे को एक सेन आवाज़ में कहूँ, तो वो सेन आवाज़ जो लॉजिकल, रीजनेबल, इंटेलेक्चुअल साउंड है, वो है प्रवीण सानी, जो कि डिफेंस एनालिस्ट है। उन्होंने किताब भी लिखी है और वो किताब है द लास्ट वॉर। उसमें उन्होंने कम्प्लीटली ये एक्सप्लेन किया हुआ है कि किस तरीके से इंडिया और अगर पाकिस्तान आमने सामने आएंगे तो किस तरह पाकिस्तान को अपरेज हासिल होगा, और किस तरह अभी तक इंडिया पाकिस्तान को शिकस्त देने में नाकाम रही है और कई बार इंडिया ने शिकस्त खाई है। चलो पहले तो ये देख लेते हैं कि किस तरीके से वो शशि थरूर का स्टेटमेंट आया है और उसके ऊपर प्रवीण सानी ने अपना इंटेलेक्चुअल लॉजिकल रिप्लाई उनको दिया हुआ है। उसके बाद देखते हैं, उसके ऊपर थोड़ा सा हम बीच में गुफ्तगू कर लेते हैं बाद में, लेकिन ये बहुत ज़रूरी है, इसको ज़रूर देखिएगा।
I'll explain all this. But first, listen to what Tharoor said on Sindoor at the festival.
Political question. I was here to discuss the constitution and not politics. But let me say very clearly, if you look at any of my public statements and record, I have at no stage violated any of the party's positions in Parliament. The only issue on which there's been a public disagreement on principle has been about Operation Sindoor, where I did take a very strong stand. Let me say to all of you that I remain unapologetic about that, because after Pahalgam happened, I myself, as an observer and commentator, which I also am. In Parliament, we have lawyers, we have doctors, we have business people. We also have some writers, and I'm one of them. And as a writer, I had written a column in the Indian Express, the North Indian Express, which I think I gave the title after Pahalgam. They gave it the title, Hit Hard, Hit Smart. And what did I advocate in that article? I said, number one, this cannot go unpunished. There has to be a kinetic response. In other words, we have to hit them. I said, equally, we are a country focused on our development. We do not want to be dragged into a prolonged conflict with Pakistan. And I said, we are a country dependent on external investment. Investors don't like war zones, so we can't take a step that will turn India into a war zone. Therefore, hit only terrorist targets, a finite number of them, and signal very clearly that we Indians are only attacking terrorism. We're not attacking Pakistan. It's Pakistan's inability and unwillingness to curb terrorism that has obliged us to do this. And I said, don't give Pakistan any further excuse for escalation. This is what I wrote. It's in black and white. You can Google me. Hit hard, hit smart, Shashi Tharoor, Indian Express. Now, you can imagine my astonishment and frankly joy when 10 days later or whatever it was, the government of India did exactly what I recommended. Now, how do you expect me to criticize what I myself have recommended? I supported it fully throughout Sindoor and afterwards. Secondly, when the government sent me, they sent many other leaders of many other parties on multi-party delegations. For some reason, my party did not like my doing this. Apparently, you can speak to them and find out why. But as I said publicly in response, and I will repeat again today, it was Nehruji who asked the very famous question, who lives if India dies? When India is at stake, when India's security, national security and place in the world is at issue, India comes first. Political parties are important. They are a vehicle to create a better India. We can disagree with each other on the ways to do that, but whenever India's interests are involved, India prevails. That's my very simple.
तो ये शशि थरूर ने स्टेटमेंट दिया हुआ है। एक्चुअली इसमें और कुछ भी नहीं है, बस इतना ही है कि वो अपने पॉलिटिकल साख को बचाने के लिए, और उनको जो मराहत मिल रहे थे, वो पाकिस्तान के अगेंस्ट कुछ डेलीगेशंस को लीड कर रहा था, और फॉरेन पॉलिसी का वो मिनिस्टर भी रह चुके हैं, फॉरेन अफेयर्स का मिनिस्टर भी रह चुके हैं, और उसमें फॉरेन अफेयर्स में उनका इंटरेस्ट भी है। और इसी लिहाज से वो ज़्यादातर अपने पॉलिटिक्स के ऊपर तवज्जो देते हैं। इंडिया के जितने भी पॉलिटिशियंस हैं वो किसी न किसी एंगल में, अगर आप उनके मीडिया को भी देखें तो वो किसी न किसी एंगल से पाकिस्तान को बीच में ज़रूर ला के शामिल कर देते हैं। तो इसी तरह उनके पॉलिटिशियंस भी है और इसी तरह उनके जर्नल्स भी है। मतलब मैं उनके लेलन टॉप के ऊपर, मैं उनके एक जर्नल को जो कि BS धनवा साहब है ना, उसका मैं एक इंटरव्यू देख रहा था, उसी के ऊपर कभी किसी वक्त रिएक्ट करेंगे हम। तो वो बहुत अजीब मुझे लगा यार कि किस तरीके से वो लॉजिक दे रहे थे कि किस तरह हमारे जो राफेल जहाज़ थे वो कैसे गिरे थे। मतलब वो एक अलग टॉपिक है उसके, लेकिन अब ये ज़रा देखिए कि किस तरह प्रवीण सानी साहब ने उसको रिस्पॉन्ड किया है। बहुत रीजनेबल, बहुत लॉजिकल बंदा है, ये ज़रा देख लीजिएगा।
Answer.
Now, Tharoor has made a couple of points. He says he's a writer, of course. So he wrote an article titled Hit Hard, Hit Smart, where he said that Pakistan did the terrorist attack in Pahalgam and therefore a kinetic response from India was needed. But India also does not want a prolonged war with Pakistan, and therefore he recommended in the article that India hit finite terrorist target inside Pakistan to signal to Pakistan that we are attacking terrorism, we are not attacking Pakistan. Then he says the government did exactly what he wrote in the article, and therefore how could he criticize Operation Sindoor when exactly what he had recommended happened there? As being part of the multi-party delegation that was sent to various capitals after Operation Sindoor to explain why they did Operation Sindoor, he was part of that despite his party's objections. Here, why he was there as part of the multi-party delegation, he quotes Prime Minister Nehru saying that Nehruji asked, "Who lives if India dies?" So, being part of the delegation, according to him, was about explaining India's national security. It was explaining India's place in the world. Now, my response. The first thing I want to say is that being a writer is not the same as knowing a subject. And understanding Operation Sindoor, there are 5 dimensions. Let me explain them briefly. There is a military dimension since it's a military operation. There's a geopolitical dimension. Then there is a balance of power dimension because there's a shift that has happened here. Fourth, it is about sphere of influence which has been impacted. And sphere of influence is germane to balance of power politics that India follows, America follows, and all the nations of the global north that the present government India wants to be seen close with, they all follow that. And the fifth is, it's about diplomacy, which we know is the visible face of international relations. So let me start with the military dimension. Now first, there is a historical background that all writers should know. Sorry. And that informs us that Pakistan is not Myanmar. You cannot breach Pakistan's sovereignty and get away with it, expect that Pakistan will not retaliate. Why? Because the first war that the two countries fought, India and Pakistan, on Kashmir, it ended on 1st of January 1949 with a military line in place called the ceasefire line. Now, in spite of all the wars that the two countries have fought thereafter, prominently the 65 war and the 1971 war, that military line still remains on our western sector and their eastern sector. It's only that after the 1971 war, the name changed from ceasefire line to line of control. What this tells us is that in all the wars, Indian military never had a decisive win over the Pakistan military in our western sector, their eastern sector. Otherwise, that military line should have been obliterated. It did not happen. In military terminology, what this means is that despite their smaller army, the Pakistan army being much smaller than the Indian army, the Pakistan military managed to maintain a balance at the operational level of war where a war outcome is determined. I've explained this in my books that I have written. Now, if you want to ignore this historical context also, how could the writer ignore the more recent 2019 Balakot attacks, where for the first time India used air power on sub-conventional operations on terrorist targets. This has never been done between India and Pakistan, and therefore the Pakistan Air Force or the Pakistan military wasn't expecting this. This was done by the Indian Air Force, hitting terrorist target in Balakot surreptitiously at night or early morning. As I said, they weren't expecting that, so they retaliated the next morning with their operation called Operation Swift. And let's see what all they did. There is evidence of it. In broad daylight, they hit targets at a place where there was high density of Indian troops, and yet no casualties on the Indian sides have been reported, which speaks about accuracy of targeting. Then, India lost MiG aircraft. A prisoner of war was taken by Pakistan Wing Commander Abhinandan. This happened because of their better electronic warfare. Let's face these facts. Next, there was a serious case of fratricide, where Indian Air Force missile hit our own helicopter with 6 casualties, 6 people who were on board. This talks about confusion, not being prepared for a retaliation, when instead the Indian Air Force should have been expecting the retaliation as soon as possible, and it came. Now, as far as the Indian side saying that a F-16 was shot down, there is no evidence of that, and the Americans also have said, prominent experts in America have said that they have all the F-16 of the Americans with Pakistan Air Force are very much intact. Now, if you want to ignore this fact also, the Balakot, then at least as a writer, the geopolitics, here I come to my second point, geopolitics should not have been underplayed. It should have been understood very clearly, and the geopolitics here is that on 5th of August 2019, when India removed 370 from Jammu and Kashmir, 2 simultaneous things happened which cannot be ignored or should not have been ignored. The first was that Chinese leadership, right from top till the lower level, everybody said that China supports Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity. They said it publicly. In other words, saying, we will stand by Pakistan. This is the first time China said this publicly. Alongside, what we saw happening was that the Shaheen series of exercises, which have been going on since 2012 between the Pakistan Air Force and the PLAF, which is the PLA Air Force, suddenly after 2019 they became advanced exercises, very advanced. So advanced that we saw the evidence of that in Operation Sindoor. What we saw and the world saw was that for the first time Pakistan Air Force showcased a new concept of war, which was at the operational level called multi-domain operation, where in very simple terms what they did was they had the aircraft of the Chinese, the J-10, and they fired the missile PL-15, which is a BVR, beyond visual range missile. It was fired to 143 kilometers beyond visual range without the radar of the J-10 being on, because that would have been a giveaway. When you open the radar of the aircraft, the enemy gets to know where the aircraft is. Instead, the data was fed to the J-10 by the AEWC. That is the aircraft which got the data of the Indian Air Force jets, passed the data to the J-10. Based on that, the missile was released. So this is about a digital ecosystem. It is an entirely different ballgame. What this means is 2 things: that in any next encounter between India and Pakistan, Pakistan Air Force will fight at the operational level of war, no more dogfights, all beyond visual range missiles, and the Pakistan Air Force will be the lead service in war, not the Pakistan Army, unlike the case of India, where the Indian Army still says that we will be the lead service in war with Pakistan. And I wrote all this, that China will stand behind Pakistan, in my book called The Last War, that came out in early 2022. I said, be prepared for a one front in reinforced war. And let me also caution here, and I am saying this with total consideration, that if the pause on Operation Sindoor is lifted, if there is another encounter between India and Pakistan, it will not be a limited one. It cannot be a prolonged one, what this writer is talking about. It will be a short, decisive war. It will be a full-fledged war, but it will be short, decisive. Now, I come to my next point. Because of Operation Sindoor, what has happened is the regional balance of power has shifted. How we know that? Because whenever any encounter happens or a war happens, conflict, skirmish, or anything what you call, or a clash, there is always a domestic version and there is a version that the world understands. And when we talk of a balance of power shift, especially at a time when the world today is multipolar and it is under once in a century change, it is important what the world thinks, because that is what makes the balance of power shift. And as far as America is concerned, which is one of the three great powers we have in this multipolar world, the other two powers, great powers being China and Russia, according to them, their distinguished panel, it came out with a report to the US Congress, a voluminous report, 745 pages, released in November 2025. I urge the writer to go on page 109, where it clearly says that in the 4-day clash between India and Pakistan, Pakistan military had success over India. This is what the world thinks, and this is what the matters eventually. This is what matters, and this is what the balance of power shift is all about. And how did this happen? This happened because the day the air war happened, on the night of 7th, 8th May, on 8th May itself, a senior Pakistan Air Force officer, he gave a briefing to the international media where he explained the concept of multi-domain operation, where he explained how they had visibility of the battle space and how they had electronic identification of all the Indian jets. This was explained. On the Indian side, no briefing was done to the international media and nothing was spoken about the air war that happened on the night of the 6th, 7th, and this is what matters between India and Pakistan. I have explained this in my videos, why it matters. I won't go in the details here. Now, as far as President Trump is concerned, then President Trump says, and he has substance in what he said 60 times at least in various capitals of the world, that he is the one who brought the ceasefire between India and Pakistan in that 4-day clash, and he was being denied the credit by India. And then he also spoke about 6 aircraft being shot down. And it was the Pakistan Prime Minister who, from the podium of the United Nations, said that 6 jets of the Indian Air Force were shot down. But India did not respond to that. India should have responded, given their version of what happened. Now, because of this balance of power shift, what has happened is the sphere of influence of Pakistan has increased substantially. And this is what needs to be kept in mind. Now, when we look at the world today, we look at Eurasia. And the heart of Eurasia, what we have, is what I call this blob. You have West Asia, which is the Middle East. You have South Asia and you have Central Asia. This should be seen as one. And this is the heart of Eurasia. And this is where, because of Operation Sindoor, the Americans have given a strategic role to the Pakistanis, plus the Pakistani also, with the Muslim world there, they have now found their footprints in this big heart of Eurasia. And this is one of the reasons why the American ambassador to India, Sergio Gore, who has just joined, I think on the 10th of January, in addition to being the ambassador to India, for the first time the Americans have given to him the role also of a special envoy to Central and South Asia, because he'll be looking at this heart of Eurasia, and this heart of Eurasia is also very important for the Russians. President Putin in 2024, he gave the concept of Eurasian security architecture. So the point that I am making is that even for the Russians, Pakistan becomes important. I won't go in the details. I've done a couple of videos on this. So the fundamental thing that I want to say here is on this sphere of influence increasing of Pakistan, that today it is exceptional in the multipolar world that we have, and there are three great powers. All the three great powers, they want Pakistan. China, of course, is their key backer. Russia needs Pakistan at some stage to be part of the Eurasian security architecture. And I have already said that President Trump has given a role, and Sergio Gore is the one who will be implementing that role on behalf of his president. This is not all. In South Asia itself, their influence of Pakistan has increased. Let's face the facts. And how it has increased is that India left SAARC in 2016, when after the Uri attack same year, India did not go for the SAARC summit in Islamabad, and India instead chose to align with BIMSTEC. And then we heard the External Affairs Minister Jai Shankar say that now India's Act East policy is aligned with America's Indo-Pacific policy. So we shifted out of South Asia, and after Operation Sindoor, with the backing of China. Why backing of China? Because China is already in South Asia, except for India and Bhutan. All the other countries, our neighborhood, they are on board the Belt and Road Initiative. Now the Pakistanis are looking for an elongated role here. And we already know, I don't have to go in the details of the relations of Pakistan and Bangladesh, what they are doing together, and how this entire very sensitive area, which is the Western Indian Ocean region, is very much under the sway of the Chinese, with their military base in Djibouti, and the Pakistanis being their close iron friends. Won't go in the details here. So this is about the balance of the sphere of influence increasing of Pakistan. Now I come to my last point, which is about diplomacy, what I said, and Mr. Tharoor being part of the multi-party delegation, and where he quotes Nehru. See, the simple thing is, everybody knows, and he's been the Minister of State for External Affairs, that's most important thing. When we are talking about balance of power politics or spheres of influence and balance of power politics, is that you have to have a neighborhood which is friendly to you. This is important. And especially so in India's case, because India also has two military lines, one with Pakistan, one with China, and unfortunately today both those lines are aligned also, as I said. So if this delegation was not going anywhere to the neighborhood, instead it was going to the other capitals of the world, then it actually has no meaning. And I'm sure Mr. Tharoor understands this. So why was he part of that? And then he also, when we look at this thing from the balance of power politics, because after all, Indians admire Trump and we admire America, then what is President Trump doing today? President Trump has suddenly realized that if he has to achieve MAGA, make America great again, he has to make sure that in his own neighborhood, which they call the Western Hemisphere, there is no outside influence. And today there is outside influence of China and Russia. So that is what he is working on, and he is trying to remove that through his Department of War. So the point to make is very simple, that diplomacy has to begin at home. I mean, this is something that everybody understands. I don't have to say any further, and these are my comments on Operation Sindoor and what Mr. Tharoor said. Thank you so much.
देखिए ना, ये रिप्लाई आपने सुनी, इससे आपको अंदाज़ा हो गया होगा, कई मरतबा इस बंदे ने अपने किताब में भी इसका जिक्र किया हुआ है और कई मरतबा इन्होंने कहा है कि इंडिया कभी भी पाकिस्तान को आउट स्मार्ट नहीं कर सकता, इंडिया कभी भी पाकिस्तान को सरप्राइज़ नहीं कर सकता, बावजूद इसके कि इंडिया की आर्मी जो है वो कई गुना ज़्यादा है पाकिस्तानी आर्मी से। लेकिन पाकिस्तानी आर्मी जो है, उनकी कैपेबिलिटी जो है वो इस तरह उन्होंने अपनी कैपेबिलिटी डेवलप की है 1971 के आफ्टर, और 1971 को भी ये पाकिस्तान का शिकस्त नहीं बता रहे। पूरी दुनिया पूरा इंडिया जो है वो उसको अपना एक विन डिक्लेयर कर रहा है। लेकिन ये जो लॉजिक दे रहे हैं वो ये है कि वो कह रहे हैं, प्रवीण सानी साहब कह रहे हैं कि इंडिया अगर ये क्लेम कर रहा है कि 1971 में भी पाकिस्तान को हमने शिकस्त दी थी या बांग्लादेश को हमने क्रिएट किया था, तो ये बात कम्प्लीटली गलत है, क्योंकि बांग्लादेश एक ऐसी जगह पे वाक़ था जिसके बीच में पाकिस्तान और बांग्लादेश के बीच में 1000 किलोमीटर का फासला था, उसके बीच में इंडिया आ रहा था। ऑलरेडी पाकिस्तान के लिए उसको एक्सेस करना बहुत ज़्यादा मुश्किल हो रहा था। तो उसके बाद पाकिस्तान आर्मी ने जो स्ट्रेटजी अप्लाई की है, जो स्ट्रेटजी अपनाई है, वो टिट फॉर टेट पॉलिसी है। खसूसी तौर पर जिस तरीके से भी पाकिस्तान की टेरिटरी वायलेट होगी, उसी तरीके से पाकिस्तान जो है उसका जवाब देगा। और ये कह रहा है, ये बता रहा है कि पाकिस्तान को जिस तरह आप लोगों ने समझा हुआ है कि ये कोई म्यांमार वगैरह है, तो ये म्यांमार वगैरह भी नहीं है। पाकिस्तान एक न्यूक्लियर पावर स्टेट है, और पाकिस्तान ने कभी भी डिनाई नहीं किया है कि मतलब किसी ने उसको उसके ऊपर रिटेलिएशन किया और पाकिस्तान ने उसका जवाब नहीं दिया हो। तो खसूसी तौर पर वो कह रहा है कि पाकिस्तान ने जिस तरीके से बालाकोट ऑपरेशन, पाकिस्तान ने जिस तरीके से मई का जो वाक़या हुआ, मई का जो जंग हुआ, और जिस तरह लीड किया गया पाकिस्तान आर्मी की तरफ से, तो कभी भी पाकिस्तान इंडिया पाकिस्तान को कभी भी आउटस्मार्ट नहीं कर सकता। ये बेसिक आर्गूमेंट है इस बंदे का, और इन्होंने खसूसी तौर पर चेहरा दिखाया, और ये बार बार दिखाता है इंडिया वालों को वो चेहरा। झूठ पे मबनी मीडिया, झूठ पे मबनी एनालिस्ट, झूठ पे मबनी जर्नल, झूठ पे मबनी पॉलिटिशियंस, रूटी का वो उनके लोग ना बहुत, बस बहरहाल वो तफसीली बातें हैं कि वो वहाँ इकानमी की क्या हालत है। बाय नेम नॉमिनल 4th लार्जेस्ट इकानमी है इंडिया, लेकिन वहाँ अगर आप देखें करोड़ों लोग भूख से मर रहे हैं। बहरहाल बहुत अच्छा रिप्लाई दिया इस बंदे ने। आई रियली अप्रिशिएट दिस प्रवीण साने। आई नो दैट ही इज़ अ रियल सैन वॉइस इन इंडिया, द ओनली पर्सन इन इंडिया जो कि मैं हमेशा सुनता रहता हूँ। कुछ बंदे हैं इसमें, जिस तरह के प्रवीण साने साहब हो गया, और इसी तरह एक और बंदा है, एक और जर्नलिस्ट है उनका, खसूसी तौर पर वो NDTV पे शो करता था, रवीश कुमार साहब, उसको भी उन्होंने, रवीश कुमार साहब है, अभिषेक साहब है, और इसी तरह कुछ सैन वॉइसेस है। मेजॉरिटी इंडिया के जो लोग हैं वो वैसे ही पागलपन के शिकार है, अपने लोगों को बेवकूफ़ बनाते हैं, और कुछ नहीं, बस सिर्फ बेवकूफ़ बनाते हैं अपने TRP के लिए, अपने पॉलिटिक्स के लिए। ओके, बेस्ट ऑफ लक। वीडियो अगर आपको पसंद आई हो तो ज़रूर आप इसको लाइक करें और सब्सक्राइब करना ना भूलें। थैंक यू सो मच फॉर वॉचिंग दिस वीडियो। अल्लाह हाफिज़।